did try to piece together uh another video real quick because that ain't the end of the story. As you all know, that is not the end of the story at all. There's another part of the story called the McDuffie riots. The McDuffie riots, because as you see in the last video, they mentioned a brother named McDuffie. So let's talk about the McDuffie riots.
On December 17th at 2 o'clock in the morning, Arthur McDuffie was fatally beaten here on this spot after a high-speed police chase.
1980, it was an incredible year. African Americans were still trying to find their way in the system. There was still a lot of pushback. Schools had just been integrated. Some of our Black leaders were just coming on board, but it was a struggle. It was still a struggle. There was this man, an insurance salesman by the name of Arthur McDuffie, who was riding his motorcycle, stopped by police.
There was a high-speed chase when McDuffie, on a borrowed motorcycle, popped a wheelie on a Brownsville corner. 4 Metro officers pursued McDuffie and were joined by City of Miami police.
This is where the chase ended, and here is where the questions begin. McDuffie crashed his motorcycle, but some of the wounds he sustained are not consistent with the accident.
McDuffie did not hit his head and wreck the bike. Witnesses say he got off the bike and was talking to the 4 Metro officers.
Basically, according to some of the evidence, he was beaten to death.
Some substantial use of force was used at the scene after the chase, and the subject died of critical injuries resulting from that use of force.
Things got a little tense after that. The medical examiner said somebody stood over him, straddled his body while he was on the ground, and hit him in the forehead with a Kel knife.
The Dade County medical examiner says 33-year-old Arthur McDuffie never had an accident on his corner. The autopsy clearly shows he was murdered, beaten with blunt instruments like police flashlights until his skull was crushed. He remained in a coma at...
Bruh. And I'm not gonna sit here and lie to y'all, man. I had never heard of this story. I'm talking about until today, till I was just doing this research today. I had never heard of Arthur McDuffie. If you're from South Florida, you might already be privy to this information. I had not heard of this brother, and the more you know.
After that, the medical examiner said somebody over him, straddled his body while he was on the ground, and hit him in the forehead with a Kel knife.
The Dade County medical examiner says 33-year-old Arthur McDuffie never had an accident on his corner. The autopsy clearly shows he was murdered, beaten with blunt instruments like police flashlight until his skull was crushed. He remained in a coma at Jackson Memorial Hospital until he died 5 days after the beating. Dr. Wright, what made you decide that the death of Arthur McDuffie was not the result of a traffic accident?
The correlation of his injuries with the scene examination and the examination of the bicycle clearly indicated that he was beaten to death.
He had no injuries from an accident falling off his motorcycle or wrecking the motorcycle.
No significant injuries whatsoever.
What did he die from?
He died as a result of blunt head injuries with destruction of his underlying brain. He was beaten to death.
They beat my child to death. They beat him to...
Wow. He said destruction.
He died as a result of blunt head injuries with destruction of his underlying brain. He was beaten to death.
They beat my
So that's the true term of beat your brains
child
out.
to death. They beat him to death like a dog. They beat my child to death. They beat him to death like a dog. Like a dog. They beat him to death. They beat him his head like a dog.
Among themselves, the 4 policemen, Sergeant Ira Diggs and officers Michael Watts, Alex Marrero, and Charles Viverka, have 47 complaints on their records, 12 involving physical force. None were ever convicted of brutality. Now they face possible murder charges.
So it went to trial. The trial was transferred to Tampa.
Franklin has been covering the trial in Tampa. He has this live eye report for us. Frank?
Jim, it took 3 weeks to find a jury here. It took 4 weeks to hear all the arguments and the evidence, but it took the jury less than 3 hours to reach the verdict.
Wow.
The 6 members of the all-white male jury left the courtroom at 11:30. 2 hours and 40 minutes later, they signaled a verdict was at hand.
Hold on, let's
Courtroom
not
at
skip over
11:30.
that.
The 6 members of the all-white male jury left the courtroom at 11:30. 2 hours and 40 minutes later, they signaled the verdict was at hand. A deadly still courtroom awaited them.
We, the jury at Tampa, Hillsborough County, this 17th day of May, 1980, by the defendant, Michael Watts, as mandatory as charged with count 2 of the information, not guilty. So say we all, David H. Fisher, foreman.
On it went. Former Sergeant Ira Diggs, not guilty of 2 counts of manslaughter, not guilty of act one.
So say we...
Oh, if one thing I love to do is watch trials. So all these recent trials that's been going on, I've been watching those trials, and this right here, this is consistent even till this day of the trials that I've been watching today of the defendant just jotting something down on a notebook. Just jotting while his verdict is being read. He's sitting there. What do you got to write at this point, bro? I mean, you ain't got nothing to, man. Come on.
As charged with count 2 of the information, not guilty. So say we all, David H. Fisher, foreman.
On it went. Former Sergeant Ira Diggs, not guilty of 2 counts of manslaughter, not guilty of aggravated battery, tampering with evidence and accessory after the fact. Alex Marrero, cleared of second-degree murder, acquitted of manslaughter, and not guilty of tampering with evidence. Finally, not guilty verdicts for former Metro Sergeant Herb Evans, of charges of tampering with evidence and accessory after the fact.
I thought it was a joke when it started. And I don't think it should have ever gotten this far in the first place.
Why did you think it was a joke?
I don't think we were treated fairly by a number of people that had vested interest. I'm not going to name names, but I'll say the Public Safety Department. I'll say the State Attorney's Office. I'll say the community itself.
The truth came out, and we have to live with the truth. If people can't live with the truth, then what are we going to live with? My reaction is the truth came out, and thank God that this country still has people who are honest and can base their opinion on the truth.
This would not have happened if the investigation had gone forward internally, if necessarily, over to the State's Attorney's Office immediately, the day or the day after it happened. But since it was delayed for 8 days and not until the press got a hold of it, that this was blown up out of proportion. That's why we're here, and that's why we were charged. That's why other officers quit, resigned, and have been basically not prosecuted, persecuted.
Bob Gilder is a Tampa businessman, a black businessman, who's been watching this trial almost every day for the U.S. Civil Rights Commission. He was angry this afternoon. He says he tried in vain to keep this trial from coming to Tampa. In the first place, he called the outcome typical Tampa justice. Frank Lynn, Channel 4 News, Tampa.
I have lost what little faith I've been able to maintain in the system as of today. I think a great many other people will feel the same way.
I think this is one of the worst things that has happened in Miami.
You know what?
System.
I've always been impressed by the eloquence of the brothers and sisters in the 60s and 70s, man. You know, you would think with all the technology that we have right now, that we would be the most intelligent and the most eloquent and the most well-spoken. But if you go back and listen to our ancestors and our people from back in the day, man, they really
lost what little faith I've been able to maintain in the system as of today. I think a great many other people will feel the same way.
I think this is one of the worst things that has happened in Miami, and I was bitterly disappointed that people were not held accountable for the act.
I remember the day that the verdict came in, and I could hear the tone of voice of the people on the radios talking about this not guilty verdict that came in against these police officers.
Today, several decisions were handed down in Tampa that shocked many of us, tore a lot of us apart inside, and made us extremely emotional. Somehow, in this town, black people must be able to deal with this in an orderly fashion. Oh, no. Injustice! Injustice! Injustice!
I really don't believe justice was done, but I feel like in the end it will be done.
And Miami just erupted.
It started before sundown at the Metro Justice Building with a peaceful rally involving both blacks and whites. But as C.T. Taylor tells us in his Live Eye report, it quickly turned to violence.
When the violence started, our reporters and photographers were right there on that spot when it started. It started at the State Attorney's Office. Remember, C.T. Taylor was right in the middle of it, calling the shots and saying, it's about to go down. Get everybody out here.
Community leaders urged the black community to show up here at the Metro Justice Building to show their feelings on the outcome of the so-called McDuffie verdict. And several hundred people did show up. At the start of the demonstration, things were peaceful. But as the crowd grew, tempers began to flare. The Metro Justice Building became the center of frustration. Bricks and bottles were thrown in the window of the Metro Justice Building, and several cars were overturned and burned. The violence quickly spread to surrounding streets. After about 2 hours of uncontrolled activities, police finally moved in the area. Would you recommend that people come to this area for any reason whatsoever?
I would say no. I would say to stay out of the area and wait till calm subsides totally. Tempers are still flaring and, could be problems. Stay out of the area for the time being.
The Metro Police cleanup crews are in the area right now, and as I said, order is restored in this particular area. However, there are many reports that uncontrolled activity is going on in other parts of Miami.
Almost simultaneously, violence then broke out in other areas. This is Coconut Grove, black area of the main highway looking like a combat zone. Store windows broken and merchandise looted. Cars overturned. All up and down the street, burglar alarms broke the silence of the early morning calm that had finally returned. But it was the black areas of Brownsville and Liberty City in Northwest Dade that suffered the most. Fires were set all along.
Bruh. Yeah, man, this is why I'm a big history buff, because, we think the things that are happening now, are brand new, or things that, you wouldn't understand, or, yeah, man, look at what we going through. Look at what's happening. Look at the nation. But when you know your history.
The early morning calm that had finally returned. But it was the black areas of Brownsville and Liberty City in Northwest Dade that suffered the most. Fires were set all along several blocks of 27th Avenue. Businesses were looted. Fire officials report responding to 10 major calls. As the violence continued, the number of casualties grew. As we said, 10 persons are known to have been killed, more than 60 injured, some directly involved in the riots, others innocent bystanders, blacks, whites, and Hispanics who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Some were dragged from their smashed cars and beaten.
We've seen all sorts of major trauma, from gunshot wounds, stab wounds, people beaten up every parts of the body, from the head, abdomen, chest, you name it, it's happened.
As far as an emergency medical situation here in Dade County, here in Miami, how bad of a situation does it seem to be?
It's a disaster. It's a war zone. There's a war going out there. It's one of the worst I've ever seen here.
In all, Jackson treated 12 gunshot wounds, 14 stabbings, and more than 30 other patients with miscellaneous injuries. 10 are said to be in critical condition. The jails, too, were crowded to capacity. By 5:30 this morning, nearly 100 persons have been arrested on a variety of charges, including burglary, looting, and obstruction of justice.
Everything that can be done has been done. We've been in direct communication with the governor.
At the National Guard Armory on 7th Avenue and 28th Street, a force of 700 men was being called out. Only 200 will be sent out at a time, the others when needed.
Being in a major riot, I did cover a lot of riots. You know, your life is in danger. You're out there. You know, you're worried about, you know, how the police are going to react to you. You know, people are legitimately, in their minds, angry, and you need to tread lightly. It can be an incredibly dangerous and an incredibly confusing time, you know, listening to both sides and trying your best to be objective as a reporter.
Injustice! Injustice! Injustice!
And so began a night of violence in Dade County, the black community's response to the acquittals in the Arthur McDuffie case, ignited by the jury's decision to acquit 4 former Dade Public Safety Department officers of his death. And this afternoon, the fuse is still lit. The toll so far, 9 persons killed, 120 injured, and as many as 100 persons arrested. Damage alone will no doubt run into the millions.
On 36th Street and 22nd Avenue, vans and cars were strewn on the side of the road. Some were burned out. Many storefronts were demolished. Some furniture was littering the sidewalks. Broken glass was everywhere. National Guardsmen drove silently through the streets, surveying the damage. Their rifles were pointed up in the air to let anyone know that they were armed and ready for trouble. But it never came. All they found was evidence of the rioting and looting that was so rampant just hours before. The Guardsmen were the first to see close up the extent of the destruction. It looked like a war zone. Off 27th Avenue and 62nd Street, huge billows of black smoke filled the sky. The fires burned out of control. Metro fire units were to respond to their calls in some neighborhoods because the police couldn't guarantee their safety. On almost every block, 27th Avenue between 36th Street and 79th Street, the scars of the McDuffie riot were burning deep into the community.
1980 has been a difficult year for Eula Bell McDuffie. In Tampa, she testified in the trial of 5 Metro police officers charged with the beating death of her son, and she had to live with a verdict which touched off 3 days of racial rioting in Liberty City. In the midst of the rioting, Mrs. McDuffie went on Channel 4 and pleaded for an end to the violence.
It was a horrible time, and it changed the face of Miami. Probably one of the most interesting parts of it. You had McDuffie riot, and then you had Mariel. And at the same time, you had 100,000 Haitians come in. It was just an incredible time, 1980.
Man, shout out to WTVJ6, NBC 6 South Florida. Fair use, man. Fair use. Man. So imagine coming up in the aftermath of this. In the aftermath of this situation, coming up in a area of town that was literally created as sort of a man, I can't even think of the word, but man, that you're cordoned off into a section of the city. Come on, man. You just cordon off to a certain section of the city. It's called a project. And we're going to get into some more of this project.
I know that you've been hearing broken promises for decades about the redevelopment of Liberty Square and other public housing communities.
Known as the Pork and Beans, the project has 750 units and over 2,000 residences. Built in 1937 under the New Deal as the first segregated public housing in the United States.
And I'm here tonight to tell you that the promises that I made have not been broken.
Families are afraid that they're going to be broken up. And when you start moving people out, they won't be able to stay in this area.
So people say that at that time, people had their own gardens in the Living Square Housing Project. People slept with their doors and windows open. Everybody knew everybody. People took care of each other's children. You rarely heard of people being harmed or threatened.
I'm here to reiterate my commitment to doing the right thing for the residents of Liberty Square.
The project opened in February of 1937 to great fanfare. It had already been the #1 visited site, tourist site in South Florida.
One thing our parents told us, you couldn't go on the other side of the wall because on the other side it was white.
It was nice.
Because on the other side it was white.
The wall. Site, tourist site in South Florida.
One thing our parents told us, you couldn't go on the other side of the wall because on the other side it was white.
It was nice. It was beautiful. We could leave our doors open, go to work, go to sleep, and worry about nobody break it in or anything like that.
Our goal all along has been to work together to build a new Liberty Square because you all deserve it, and it's the right thing to do.
When they're living in a war, they can't run from it because it's there. This is where we are in a war. We can't run from it because the next house we go to, it's over there too. You understand? So that's what we need to clean up, the violence.
Here's a community that has more than sort of superficial needs, and where media coverage can do something beyond simply getting web clicks.
Flashing lights, bullet holes, and teddy bear memorials have become so common here in the Liberty Square housing project. Ask any neighbor, and they'll point out multiple spots around their homes where people were murdered.
Words matter, how you describe places and how you reference them, because then it becomes like a tag. You know, again, when you normally hear about Liberty City, it comes with a preceding adjective: crime-stricken, crime-ridden.
Miami-Dade County Mayor Carlos Jimenez announced his plans to transform Liberty Square, instilling hope and even bringing tears to some eyes that have seen tragedy after tragedy.
Y'all don't live there. And some people have been there all their lives. And it's not a bad thing. That's where they're comfortable in. That's a historical site.
We are concerned about fairness. We are concerned about injustice and making sure that people have the right to choose.
People here want to keep their legacy going on. There's a lot of people that grew up in this area who like to see the legacy of this area keep going.
A lot of people don't know their history and what we have, because once it's gone, you can't recoup it. And if you don't talk about it, if you don't share it, the young people don't know it. They don't know what they have. And if we don't fight to keep it, you know, it's gone.
My name is Carly Hansberry. I moved here in 2010. I've been here for maybe about 4 or 5 years now, 106. I have 6 beautiful kids living here, raising my.
Woo! Wait a minute. Hold on. I just can't gloss over that either now. 6? 6?
10. I've been here for maybe about 4 or 5 years now, 106. I have 6 beautiful kids living here, raising my kids on my own. It was hard. It was very hard, but I learned to grow. I learned to deal with it. I learned to adjust to it, because, you know, if you don't go through the things that you go through, you'll never learn.
Wait a minute. Who was that? Who was he? Where he work at? What do you got to do with this? I don't know. But somebody, hey, she said that like it was just an affliction that became her or something. You know, like she was just chilling and bam, 6 kids. You know, no, it don't really work like that. Some things transpired.
I learned to deal with it. I learned to adjust to it, because, you know, if you don't go through the things that you go through, you'll never learn.
My name is Aquarius Dixon. I'm 19 years old. I'll be 20 October 29th. I attend Bethune-Cookman University, studying a major in business management. I've been living here in Liberty City for about 7 to 8 years. We moved down here from Fort Lauderdale in my 6th grade year.
My name is Jennifer Hansberry. I'm 18 years old. I just turned 18 on May 14th. I also just recently graduated from Miami Northwestern on June 9th. And yes, I will be attending Bethune-Cookman as well.
Okay, y'all. I ain't trying to be crazy. I ain't trying to be funny. I ain't trying to, you know, I know a lot of people say don't be judging, don't do this, don't do that. But hey, this is my take on it. I looked at him first. I thought he was yes, he is a grown man. He's 19, but I thought he was a grown man. I thought this joker was about 30. And that's how we say it from where I'm from, 30. I thought he about 30. And her, I could give her 32. I hate to say it. And I'm not 32, but 32. Like 30 TOO. So man, I'm not going to that's a result. In my opinion, you know, my mama used to see people and she used to say, boy, you know, that's some hard living. And I'm like, what you talking about, mama? She's like, shoot, they be living hard. You know, she done had a hard life. He done had a hard life. And that's what I'm seeing is, man.
Well, once we finally moved down here, graduated from Miami.
I love the fact that they trying to get up and get out. That's the point, is upward mobility. But, you know, you have to ask yourself, was it an uphill battle?
On June 9th. And yes, I will be attending Bethune-Cookman as well in the fall. Once we finally moved down here, it was like a movie or something. It was like the things that happened, I could have sworn I only seen those in movies.
Like the whole first week, I think it was sleepless night because of like violence, like shooting. We was like terrified to the point where when it happened, we're ducking down low.
I taught my kids well that you don't have to follow trouble, even when it comes your way. You have choices in your mind that you can make. They have, because they're trying to keep their sister safe.
It sounds crazy to say that you adapted to drive-bys and shootings and stuff, but that's just how it is. Like,
I lost a friend, but I wasn't there. And then, okay, you know, it was hard to get through that. But then again, there was another friend I lost, and I was actually there. And, you know, looking at him laying there and like blood and everything, like I was in the shock like for a long time. I didn't come out, I didn't speak or do nothing.
See, that's what I'm talking about. That's trauma. That is mental trauma. You know, you heard the video before this keep talking about a war zone, a war zone, a war zone. So that is PTSD if you're in a war zone. And now if you're in a makeshift war zone or a warlike environment like the Liberty City, Overtown, Pork and Beans area, the mental, you know, people keep saying, oh, Antonio Brown, he's got mental issues. But are they talking about, what are they talking about? Do they think it's because of where he came from? I guarantee that's not the way they're looking at it, but that's the way I'm analyzing this thing.
I can honestly say, besides all the bad part, it's a lot of talented kids and people here that actually stays in the community. And we got to experience that for ourselves. Like, we have a lot of different parties and cookouts around here. And even if you don't know the person, they invite everybody. They don't care. Everybody just come out and have a good time.
Basically, if you look at the history, basically it's saying that they didn't really too much care about the people who live here. It's always hot, you know, this South Florida. Why would they give us a heater with no AC? You know, everyone around here, they got about like 3 and 4 fans for almost each room and everything. Like, you know, that kind of make you think like, what's going on?
They experienced some things that you know, I never thought and like they would experience, but you know, they learned from it. You know, seeing a lot over here with the shooting and you know, friends of friends, and it was just something, you know, like I said, it's not easy to adjust to, but you have to.
And I have to say that I have to commend that young man for not getting into the drama. He could have easily been a participant, and he may have been, but you know, from the looks of it, he had participating in some of the gang violence, where he's not in the gang. He's trying to get up out of there. And the young sister, she could have easily already have her own kids and be you know, looking for a project of her own to live in. But it looks like she's trying to get it out too.
Hey, I'm on my way. My mom, she's a survivor. She survived a lot. We struggled a lot when we didn't have money and food, anything. My mama always found a way. And sometimes at night, when she thought we would sleep, we heard her up crying, stressing herself, trying to figure out what she could get net support from.
She would go without just so we can have, man. You know, a lot of people say, you know, how their mom's the best, but you know, I feel like as if my mom's not the best, she's the greatest. So I wouldn't be who I am if it wasn't for my mom. I'm just grateful for her.
And I mean, and I feel that, man. And I'm not gonna lie, like, oh man, this is hard for me because I've lived on a lot of different sides of this fence. And I mean, I understand the praise of mothers, but at the same time, there's a lot more to the story, especially since I didn't know that they were her kids at first, but seeing that you have a 19-year-old and looks like maybe an 18-year-old, and that's only 2 of 6. So you know, if you have 2, I mean, and we don't know her whole story, but me, I only have 1. And I've dedicated my whole life, and financially, I've dedicated so much money to just my 1 child. I'm talking about, and if you guys got kids, y'all know. But I mean, I'm finishing up. My daughter has a 0. Her bill for college is 0. She doesn't owe. I paid every single dime. Every single dime. I mean, it never ends. And to this day, she still will hit me up like, Daddy, I need this, I need that. And I'm like, you are grown. But it does not, I can't imagine having 6. But she had 2, and then somehow 4 more pop up. And if you've already seen a couple of these little babies. And I'm like, okay, well, where these babies come from? And then you got to blame the brothers too, because the brother, why are you skating? You know what I'm saying? If you know you ain't about to be there, you know you're not trying to be responsible for this situation. Why are you skating, player? Sit down. But then who ends up having to deal really with this, or who's really affected the most? The kids.
Just so we can have, man. You know, a lot of people say, you know, how their mom's the best, but you know, I feel like as if my mom's not the best, she's the greatest. So I wouldn't be who I am if it wasn't for my mom. I'm just grateful for her.
Donnie. Yeah, this big Donnie. Hey, what's up, baby? My name is Carl Gray, aka Big Donny, and I'm from Liberty Square, aka Poker Bean. This is where I come from. This is basically where everything that I learned and acquired in life started right here. Oh, this was White Sands. We used to have swings, merry-go-rounds. Yeah, it was it was like we could come out. All the kids could come out and play. But I grew up right there. 25.
President-elect Franklin Delano Roosevelt came to Miami before taking office. And during that time, he was taken to Colored Town. And the president-elect was shown the conditions in Colored Town at that time, which were very, very crowded.
The areas where Black people were
Colored Town.
But Miami, we have tolerated our disgraceful slums for over 20 years. I'm reading these leaflets, these pamphlets, or whatever they are. Miami slums must go now. Your vote. Remove this sinister figure. And they got like some type of ghoul up there, but it almost looks like King Kong or something to that effect, which if you know the history of King Kong, you can dig into that. But it says on the figure, it says crime, immorality, epidemics, fire hazards, juvenile delinquency. And it says, how can a family earning $3,000 per week pay $20 for rent, if I'm not mistaken? Wow. And then it also says we must have more public housing for low-income families. The other leaflet says remove the monster 6 is the day, and it has the same things. Get rid of Miami slums. Wow.
At that time, which were very, very crowded.
The areas where Black people were living were limited in space and scope and were becoming denser and denser.
Wow. So in the 1930s, it was called Colored Town, or description of the conditions of Colored Town in the 1930s. During spring and summer months, sweltering termite-chewed rooms creaked and crooked under the day's heat and the night's humidity. Windows and doorways without proper screens made many mattresses or bed chambers home to any combination of rats, cockroaches, silverfish, mosquitoes, and sandflies. Cases of tuberculosis and dengue fever afflicted many of Miami's Black residents as well. Wow.
And Roosevelt said he would do something about that when he got to Washington. Well, what he did was authorize the building of the Liberty Square housing project.
Liberty Square was really the first project to expand what had been decades of these traditional boundaries for Black residents in Miami.
When the government proposed putting a housing project there, that was a white area. There were not a lot of Black people living up there. And some of the white folks, probably many of them, did not want Blacks moving across a certain line.
One person writing a letter called Black expansion in Miami like a bonfire gone out of control.
So they physically built a wall, now called the segregation wall, to limit where Blacks likely buy property and live.
During segregation, this wall had separated the African American from the Caucasian neighborhood. So the people who had lived in Liberty Square housing development from
Let's
the
go back
Caucasian
to that
neighborhood.
wall. Now, what I've read is that parts of this wall have been destroyed and parts of the wall still exist. And a lot of the reports say this wall used to be a lot higher.
So the people who had lived in Liberty Square housing development had to take a pass actually to leave this neighborhood, and this wall had separated them. This wall plays a very significant role in the history of African American in this neighborhood.
You could not go over that wall because on the other side was white, and they didn't allow it to come on that side.
That side of 12th Avenue on back was white. So when we didn't have money then, back in the early 60s, you understand me, coming up to get a bike. We weren't able to get a bike, but I go get me a bike because I stand right down the corner, me and my boys. And we wait till we see Billy. We go Billy riding back. With his little bicycle with the screamers flying in the wind. Next thing you know, I have Billy bike going back that way. Because I done took Billy bike. Sad to say, but that's what life dictated back then, and we did what we had to do. That's what
Man, see, this is and we took Billy bike. Sad to say. But that we had to do what we had to do. Why you had to do it? What was you trying to get to with the bike? You said you ain't had no money. You trying to sell the bike? What's happening?
I had to say, but that's what life dictated back then, and we did what we had to do.
people wanted to be there. They wanted to be around the housing project. That was the up and coming place to be.
It was the first public housing in the southern part of the United States, where that African American could have indoor plumbing, have a shower. And just imagine back then. Back then, African American were concentrated in Overtown.
So you got a lot of school teachers and business people building their homes around the housing project.
People were proud of their homes. They were proud of the gardens and the amenities that they added to their homes at Liberty Square.
People who moved there, they knew that they were moving there for better living conditions because of how the government mandated that project be built. And as a result of that, it was so much pride, even from the outside in, meeting the yards. It was the shrubbery and the grass.
It was part of that social engineering of the working class that the New Deal was so determined to engage.
It was actually one of the most modern spaces to move into at the time, and families would live there and they're like, wow, there's indoor plumbing here. And, so at the time when it was built, it was really up to date.
It was the best place to live. It was simply beautiful, simply marvelous. Beautiful families.
I was on the famous street for skating. So Christmas, we couldn't even go out the back door. It was just, when you woke up at 5 o'clock, you heard the skating, and it stopped maybe 6 o'clock that night. The parents didn't have to worry where the kids were going.
I never had a key to my house. We never had a key. We just come in and go and come.
My experience in this project here was lovely. My time here, I enjoyed it. I got so many memories that because I learned a lot. You grow up kind of fast, because you had to. You had more than one mama and more than one daddy. You had more than one brother. You had more than one sister.
Everybody was your parent. If you done something wrong, you can take care. That parent can take care of you. It was it was love.
So when the downtown leg of Interstate 95 was completed in the 1950s, it ripped through the center of Overtown, wiping out extensive housing as well as the Black business district. Some 40,000 African Americans made Overtown home before the interstate came, but now less than 8,000 remain in an urban wasteland dominated by the expressway. Because you heard the brother just say he enjoyed his time there. I think it said 1953 to 1960 he lived there and he loved it. But then, man, after that, started getting gritty.
Greed is what happened. The downtown white power structure wanted that land in Overtown to be available for downtown to expand to the west. And that meant that the expressway needed to be farther west so that this could take place.
You have a population in Liberty City that actually were displaced from Overtown, and were displaced because I-95 came through their neighborhood, a thriving neighborhood, and obliterated it.
It was intentional. It was, I think, criminal to have done that to Overtown for the mere fact that the business community needed land to expand. And the Black community in Overtown is still paying the price for that.
After they started building it, what we call I-95, and they went through Overtown and they displaced a lot of people. And what they call gentrification, that was one of the first things. So we basically came out here to Liberty Square.
So now you had what had been a fairly model blue collar and then really up and coming Black enclave in Liberty City, swamped with all of these folks who'd been displaced by that expressway. When I came back from college after being away for 4 years, the interstate appeared. It was miraculous. It was incredible. The first time I took it, I couldn't believe it. And then I noticed that it elevated itself over Overtown, so that if you really didn't want to see Black people, just don't look down. And so it was.
Wow. But a lot of things, one part of that it talked about was the business district, because in the last video they had Sammy Davis up there talking to the school students, talking about education, and they also had a brother who said, education was the key or was our way out. But in actuality, and now that we've tried that model, learn that in some ways, yes, education can help you rise above, but business ownership, entrepreneurship, ingenuity is one of the big things lacking. And one thing that we most definitely need is those attributes, and also hard skill sets. We got the soft skills and we got the work for somebody else skills, but we need actual hard skills and trades that can be built into businesses. If you know how to roof, if you know how to get on a roof and put a roof on, you technically in effect have a roofing business at that point that you can do. And we need to think like that in almost all aspects. If you want to get into IT and you have some IT certs, then hey, create your own LLC. Create your own LLC. And now when somebody wants to hire you for that IT job, you have to let them know that, hey, I'm already employed by this contracting company. And if you want me and my skill set, you have to go through my company. And now that company will talk to your company, which you are effectively your company, right? So you basically just tell them, hey, I got one guy, but he's good. He's my best guy. And you pay yourself through your corporation. But we'll get into that on a different screen.
I went to Liberty Square and went to the housing project that afternoon. I got a call from a reporter, said, they're killing people on 62nd Street? I was at home in Coconut Grove, in shock. The verdicts had just been announced. So I drove up to 62nd Street and 12th Parkway by the housing project and saw pouring out of that project, out of those apartment buildings into the street, and no police.
Well, if you look at Liberty Square, the riots of the 1980s still kind of hang over that community. And if you want to understand the present, you have to understand the past.
I saw this boy, he was maybe 18, lying in the median strip. I thought it was a bundle of clothing someone had discarded. It was this poor boy. And there were about 15 young black men surrounding the other brother. This was right at the Liberty Square Housing Project, on the property of the housing project, using a Miami Herald newspaper box to kill this other boy in broad daylight, with thousands of people, at least hundreds of people watching, including me. And a lot of that anger came out of that housing project.
And we can go anywhere, up and all over, and whatever, you ain't hear no gunshots and all that. So that really bothered me because it made an impact of everybody got the wrong perception of the project.
So for about maybe 2 decades, the Liberty Square Housing Project grew Black Lives leadership, grew the teachers, grew the police officers out of that housing project. And then it started to fall apart. But for a long time, it was the bedrock of that community, and it was the place where people went to do better, to be better, and they were.
I remember being jealous of the folks who lived in Liberty Square because there was such a community, like the neighborhood I grew up in, like you didn't know your neighbors that closely. You can't go to your friend's house. Like it was, you can't cross the street, you might get hit by a car and things like that. But my friends who lived in Liberty Square, they would talk about going to the Candy Lady house, and every housing project has a Candy Lady, and going to buy frozen cups and hot sausages and pickled eggs and those types of things. And I'm like, I want that. I want a Candy Lady.
This idea of trying to find a new way to house those who need housing, who are not otherwise able to
go back.
Hot sausages house, and every housing project has a Candy Lady.
Square,
they would talk about going to the.
I know a lot of sisters say that brothers don't like natural hair, but I got to let it be known that I love natural hair, and I'm loving this look on her. Her cheekbones, her complexion, the hair. This woman is beautiful, man. Her teeth.
Candy Lady house, and every housing project has a Candy Lady, and going to buy frozen cups and hot sausages and pickled eggs and those types of things. And I'm like, I want that. I want a Candy Lady.
This idea of trying to find a new way to house those who need housing, who are not otherwise able to start and jumpstart their own lives, I think is an incredibly important contribution.
There was a lot of people in this park that to us, you understand what I'm saying? And to this day, a lot of those people still had the poking bean, what we call the poking bean, in them. Regardless of what they done spread it out in life, this is ground zero.
Boom. Hold on. That's the video right there. That's my point right there. Antonio Brown got the poke and beans in him. Antonio Brown has the poke and beans in him.
Meant something, to us. You understand what I'm saying? And to this day, a lot of those people still had the poking bean, what we call the poking bean, in them. Regardless of what they done spread it out in life, this is ground zero.
Yeah, it's our neighborhood, and it's a great neighborhood. We just have to learn how to cope. I would really like to see the change, but not the full change, because a lot of the history that I've heard that went through these projects, I don't want them to get rid of that because it means a lot to a lot of people that was here before I got here.
Today is our annual picnic where we always give out our scholarship, and it's so good to see people on this side of the grave, and that's what it's all about, being together, friends and family, and having fun. Usually when we get together like this, it's at a funeral, and we decided, no, we need to meet on a happy note. So now we meet on a happy note, and then we feel good when we do something positive with when we have things that it's not just the money, but it's giving back. So we give back to those that our roots come from Liberty Square.
Last year's recipient, Mr. Doc Wavis Dixon, which is the brother of.
I remember it being a nice place to live. Kids in certain areas, they had to go to the bathroom outside. We didn't. We didn't have that. We had running water inside.
I'm getting there.
Something needs to be done to it because it's old, and they need, if they're going to rebuild it, fine, but they need to also remember the people that are living in there now and don't exclude them when they rebuild.
At New at 6, one of South Florida's most notorious housing projects could soon be wiped out and replaced with a brand new complex. Project supporters say the move will crack down on crime and revitalize a very depressed part of Liberty City.
To raise crime-ridden Liberty Square in Liberty City.
Also on 7, Miami's oldest and most notorious public housing project is getting a makeover.
Except Lorena Estrada in Liberty Square with
I just want what's fair for this community that they deserve.
At the end of the day, you got 700 and something families there. That's public housing residents. We need 700 and something public housing residents going back in because you are uprooting their lives.
People are coming together and making sure that we have a great environment to grow up and that our children grow up in.
Definitely something to keep an eye on, for the community, for the media. How does this play out in this landscape at a time where we are talking about major issues that are affecting Miami, such as affordability, such as housing, access to transportation, schools?
I'm going to be open. We're going to do articles. We're going to make sure that everyone hears what my struggle is. Can we stop it? Can we slow? What can we do? And my heart tells me, just talk about it.
There is a fear that whatever's built in Liberty Square will be for somebody else.
This is not the first redevelopment in the United States of America of low-income neighborhood or public housing. And 90% of the people never come back. 90% of people never benefit from tax dollars. 90% of people never benefit from government investment in low to moderate income neighborhood. And our fight and our argument is that, yes, you could redevelop a poor neighborhood and include everyone.
We feel that team is going to be able to work with the residents to, again, to make the public housing residents and the public housing units be a...
And that's getting all into what they about to do with it. But man, you just got to be a certain type of individual to live that life. And this is still leading up to history. I think we're still up to the 80s in Liberty City. We haven't really gotten to what happened in the 90s. And one thing that I did catch with all those different news articles they ran real quick is how they always said crime ridden, or they always use some type of wording before they said Liberty City. So let's check out another one, and let's give also a shout out to that last page, Liberty Square Rising. Liberty Square Rising is the page that I just was showing that other video from. So if you want to see more of that, check out that video. And now we've got Liberty City, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm most definitely not going to go through all 4 parts of this. We already been rolling for like an hour. I kind of basically just wanted to make the point that I don't think Antonio Brown is misunderstood. I mean, I don't think he's crazy. I think he most definitely is misunderstood, and I most definitely think he has some type of due to his upbringing, he's just a different type of cat, man. And you just got to know how to deal with this cat. You got to know how to talk to this brother. And I mean, I'm not absolving him from any of the other crazy stuff he's done, but hey, they say when you get money, it just amplifies or just makes who you really were. It amplifies your personality times 10 or times how much money you got. And when you look at this brother, he's sitting on about 20, 30 million. It's a whole different ball game. Now, before we even hit this, because we've been hitting this hard, there is another wrinkle, matter of fact, to this whole thing. That when Antonio Brown finally got to the crib, there is a picture out there. Now, I guess I'm gonna try to find this picture, but there is a picture out there of him supposedly calling an Uber, man, when he ran off. There's a picture of him calling an Uber, supposedly. I got to see if I can find this weird picture, bruh. But supposedly he called an Uber And supposedly, hold on, let's go on. Let me go on and show y'all the Uber real quick. Supposedly this cat called the Uber, and then he went to the crib and he shared his new rap song that he so Antonio Brown waiting for a ride. And I'm probably just gonna do a part 2 of this thing, man. And just lead it out with this new song that he came out with. Because this is crazy. If you want to go see the song, man, it's called Pit Not the Palace. Pit Not the Palace. And you can just YouTube that. But I'm about to get out of here, man. I'm gonna probably do a part 2 tomorrow to this. It's 2:30 in the morning. I'm out of here.